Imagine a tiara that hasn't been worn in decades. Too heavy, too bold, too direct in what it reminds us of, an era most would rather leave buried. Even Queen Elizabeth II, who officially owned it, never appeared in it publicly. Why? Because this piece of jewelry is far more than a glittering ornament. It's a symbol of power, ambition, family secrets, and decisions that still make waves inside the monarchy. This tiara was born out of a restriction. It was assembled from gifts of questionable origin, dismantled jewels, and stones that passed through some very controversial hands. One of its emeralds once belonged to a woman who stole royal jewels and got away with it. Others were shards from the largest diamond ever found on Earth. And though the tiara was redesigned several times to soften its image, its past refuses to stay silent. After 1947, wearing this crown was seen as poor taste. It symbolized an empire that ruled millions and believed it had the right to. Still, decades later, someone did wear it, and it was not who the public expected. Why was this tiara kept hidden for so long? What scandal surrounds the emeralds it once carried? And was it truly created in violation of royal law? If you think royal jewels are just luxury accessories, watch until the end, because the story of the Delhi Durbar tiara isn't about fashion. It's about power, control, and one woman who used a crown to say to the world, "I'm here, and I'm the real queen." For decades, we saw Queen Elizabeth II surrounded by majesty, glittering tiaras, massive necklaces, brooches steeped in centuries of history. But not all the jewelry she wore belonged to the crown. Among the official regalia locked away in the Tower of London, the Queen had her own private collection. And that collection held far more secrets than most realize. Because inside it were jewels inherited from her mother and grandmother, received as gifts, discreetly acquired. Not just sparkling gems, but pieces tied to personal decisions, family dramas, and sometimes silent political compromises. Unlike the crown jewels, which automatically pass from one monarch to the next along with the throne, a personal collection is just that, personal. A queen can gift it, will it, or keep it locked away forever. And among Elizabeth II's private pieces was one tiara that she never wore publicly, not once during her entire reign. In fact, some of the jewels in her possession hadn't been seen for generations. That changed when one of the grandest diadems in royal history was taken out of its case and placed on the head of a woman long viewed as an outsider by both the media and the public. The Delhi Durbar tiara. The name alone sounds exotic, almost like an enchanted relic from another world. And in a way, that's exactly what it is. This is not just an accessory. It is a silent witness to empire, ambition, and legacy. But before it reached Camilla, the Duchess of Cornwall, and eventually Queen Consort, this tiara had a journey filled with political maneuvering, inherited tension, and the blurring of lines between the private and the official. The tiara was part of a unique set of royal jewelry, informally known as the Cambridge Emerald Parure, a collection of emeralds and other gems steeped in family scandal and reassembled over generations. Unlike the formal crown jewels, this parure was alive. Its pieces were disassembled, remade, and repurposed according to the occasion. A necklace could become a brooch, earrings turned into tiara drops. That was the magic of the private royal jewels. They evolved with the woman who wore them. But among all those treasures, the Delhi Durbar tiara was the most monumental and mysterious. It's enormous, so much so that many royal women simply couldn't wear it physically. Perhaps that's why Queen Elizabeth II never did. Or perhaps it was something else, the weight of symbolism that grew heavier with time. Because among all royal tiaras, this one didn't whisper. It spoke loudly of power, of empire, of a time the modern monarchy would rather not revisit. And yet, long before Camilla, before Elizabeth II, there was one woman who brought this piece to life, a woman who refused to settle for anything less than extraordinary. While Elizabeth preferred elegant restraint, her grandmother, Queen Mary, was a collector, a designer, and a strategic mind in the royal world of diamonds and duty. It was Mary who commissioned the creation of this extraordinary piece, one that would become a symbol of imperial authority and a silent reminder that Britain once ruled half the world. It all began with a single restriction. The crown jewels were not allowed to leave British soil. But in 1911, a grand ceremony was planned in India, a proclamation of George V and Mary as Emperor and Empress of India. The official regalia had to stay home, so Mary didn't ask for permission. She chose instead to create something even grander, a privately owned diadem, paid for with her own funds, yet majestic enough to rival the nation's treasures. And so began the story of one of the most controversial and powerful tiaras of the 20th century. At the time, no one could have imagined that this tiara would become almost cursed. Too heavy, too extravagant, too honest. Because among all the crowns and diadems worn by Europe's queens, the Delhi Durbar didn't whisper, it roared. I come from another era, and I'm still here. That's what made it magnetic. And perhaps that's also what made it dangerous. At the dawn of the 20th century, the British Empire stood at the height of its power. Its colonies stretched across vast continents, and the world watched the royal family's every move with awe and expectation. It was in this atmosphere that the coronation of King George V and his wife Queen Mary as Emperor and Empress of India was being prepared. This was to be more than a formal ceremony. It was meant to be a spectacle of dominance, wealth, and imperial grandeur. And while the official coronation was set to take place at Westminster Abbey in London, a second, no less symbolic event was planned at the very heart of the empire. Thus was born the idea of the Delhi Durbar, a ceremonial assembly designed to showcase British rule and royal authority to the Indian subjects. But almost immediately, a major issue arose. The crown jewels were legally forbidden to leave the United Kingdom. That meant neither the crown nor any of the state regalia could be used during the Indian coronation. And what is a coronation, after all, without a crown? Queen Mary didn't argue. She didn't beg for an exception. Instead, she made a bold and very royal decision. She would commission a new tiara, not one belonging to the state, but a personal piece, paid for from her own funds, yet designed to be so magnificent that it could rival the finest of the official treasures. And so began the creation of what would become one of the most extraordinary and heavily symbolic jewels in the royal vault, the Delhi Durbar tiara. The task was given to Gerard, the royal jeweler trusted with the family's most historic pieces. But even for them, this commission was unique. The tiara wouldn't be made entirely from scratch. Its foundation came from the remains of an earlier piece, a diamond tiara created for Queen Mary by Boucheron after her 1901 visit to South Africa. During that trip, she was gifted several large diamonds from the De Beers mines, stones loaded with political meaning, mined in the heart of the empire. Now, those same diamonds would be reborn into a new crown. The structure of the tiara was crafted in platinum and gold, and its design featured intricate S-shaped scrolls, lyres, and interlacing diamond garlands. It looked less like an accessory and more like jeweled architecture, but its true character came from the stones that crowned it. Originally, the Delhi Durbar tiara was topped with 10 large emerald cabochons cut in teardrop shapes. These weren't just decorative, they were part of the famous Cambridge emeralds, a collection that carried with it a scandalous history. For years, these emeralds had been in the possession of a woman who had been romantically involved with Queen Mary's late brother. After his passing, it was expected that the emeralds would return to the royal family, but they didn't. They remained with the mistress, until Mary, with quiet diplomacy and persistence, reclaimed them and turned them into a statement of legacy and control. But that wasn't the only dramatic detail in the tiara's composition. Queen Mary also incorporated two of the most legendary diamonds in existence, the Cullinan 3 and 4, affectionately known within the family as Granny's chips. The Cullinan is the largest diamond ever found, and these two stones were cut from its enormous heart. Cullinan 3, shaped like a pear and weighing 94.4 carats, was placed at the top of the tiara. Cullinan 4, a square-cut diamond weighing 63.6 carats, sat at the front. The tiara's design allowed for these stones to be swapped out, added, or removed as needed, a display of both versatility and power. The result was staggering. The tiara dazzled with imperial brilliance. It was, quite literally, too magnificent to ignore. And it was heavy. So heavy, in fact, that wearing it required exceptional posture and physical strength. Still, Queen Mary bore its weight with pride. In archival footage from the Delhi Durbar, we see her standing tall, regal, immovable, wearing a crown that symbolized more than monarchy. It symbolized dominion. In time, the emeralds were removed and transferred to another piece, the now iconic Vladimir tiara. Later, the Cullinans were taken out as well and turned into brooches. Yet the Delhi Durbar tiara remained, its structure intact, its history only growing deeper. Because Mary never saw her jewelry as finished. She saw it as living, always adaptable, always evolving. What began as a workaround to a legal restriction became something far greater. The Delhi Durbar tiara was no longer just a stand-in for the real crown. It became a monument in itself, a personal crown for a woman who understood that jewels speak louder than words, and that power isn't always worn in the form prescribed by law. Sometimes it's built, stone by stone, into something that can outlive the very empire it was meant to serve. When we talk about Queen Mary, it's impossible to picture her as just a royal consort. She was much more. A woman with the mind of an architect, at least in the world of jewels. Every piece in her collection wasn't simply worn. It was engineered, reconstructed, refined. In her eyes, no jewel was ever truly finished. If something wasn't perfect, it was disassembled and transformed into something more fitting, more powerful. The Delhi Durbar tiara was the most striking example of this philosophy. After the ceremony in India, it didn't disappear into a vault. On the contrary, Mary saw it as the beginning of its journey, not the end. The first major change she made was the removal of the emeralds. Those signature teardrop cabochons, which had given the tiara its distinctly exotic and imperial flair, were taken out in the 1920s. They later reappeared in another legendary piece, the Vladimir tiara. For Mary, jewels were not sacred in their current form. They were tools, resources, living elements of royal identity. In place of the emeralds, she played with diamonds, particularly the famous Cullinan 3rd and 4th, often affectionately referred to as Granny's chips. In any other collection, these diamonds would be the stars, but to Mary, they were components, part of a larger vision. Cullinan 3rd, the 94.4 carat pear-shaped diamond, was placed at the top. Cullinan 4, a 63.6 carat square-cut stone, was installed at the front. The tiara had been constructed with versatility in mind, allowing for stones to be added, swapped, or removed. It was a living crown, responsive to the moment, to the message, to the woman wearing it. Mary didn't wear jewelry as mere decoration. She wore it as language. Every change had meaning, sometimes practical, sometimes strategic, sometimes deeply personal. She treated her jewels not as relics, but as expressions of power. And nowhere was that more evident than in the evolution of the Delhi Durbar tiara. Eventually, Queen Mary decided it was time for the tiara to begin its next chapter. In 1946, more than 30 years after its creation, she loaned it to her daughter-in-law, Queen Elizabeth, later known as the Queen Mother. The tiara accompanied her on her 1947 royal tour of South Africa, marking a rare and significant public appearance. This wasn't just a fashion choice, it was a calculated symbol of continuity, of royal strength in a changing world. And then, silence. The Queen Mother never wore it again. Though it remained in her possession for the rest of her life, the tiara was never seen in public after that South African tour. Why? Some say it was simply too heavy. Others suggest that its symbolism was too overwhelming, a remnant of imperial grandeur in a world rapidly moving beyond empire. In any case, it had once again faded into the shadows. When the Queen Mother passed, the tiara was inherited by Queen Elizabeth II. But even as the most visible woman in the world, with countless public appearances and state events, she never wore it, not once. It remained quietly stored away, not forgotten, but unspoken. Its weight, both literal and symbolic, lingered in the background. Yet even in storage, the tiara was designed to evolve. Mary had ensured that it could be adjusted, that its shape could shift, that its stones could be reimagined. But what no one foresaw was how the world itself would change. With each passing decade, the monarchy became more modest, more restrained, more conscious of public perception. And the Delhi Durbar, in all its imperial boldness, seemed to belong to a world that no longer existed. Still, it was never discarded. It was preserved. Because the most powerful royal jewels don't disappear. They wait in silence until the right moment and the right queen. In the early 21st century, at a time when the British monarchy was navigating delicate waters, the Delhi Durbar tiara made a sudden and unexpected return to the spotlight. Monumental, almost theatrical, long hidden from public view, and precisely because of that, utterly captivating. But it wasn't just the tiara itself that caused a stir. What truly set off waves of reaction was who wore it. Camilla, Duchess of Cornwall, a woman long considered controversial, heavily scrutinized by the press and public alike, now appeared wearing one of the most storied and symbolically loaded pieces in the royal collection. This moment happened in 2005, shortly after her marriage to Prince Charles. A union that, for years, seemed impossible had finally become reality. But public sentiment was still raw. The wounds of the past hadn't fully healed. And then came a gesture, subtle yet thunderous, from Queen Elizabeth II. She loaned the Delhi Durbar tiara to Camilla. Officially, it was a long-term loan. Unofficially, it was a clear sign of royal approval. Because in the world of monarchy, wearing a tiara like this isn't about fashion. It's about status, legitimacy, and power. Camilla wore the tiara to a state banquet in honor of the King and Queen of Norway. She stepped into the room wearing it, and the world took notice. It was the first time the Delhi Durbar tiara had been seen in public in decades. Queen Elizabeth II herself had never worn it, not even once during her reign. But Camilla did, and with that, the tiara re-entered royal history with full force. Reactions came swiftly. Some praised the moment. At last, the tiara was back in circulation. Others were more critical, questioning whether such a heavily imperial piece still had a place in the 21st century. The very name Delhi Durbar invoked memories of British colonialism, and for some, the symbolism was simply too heavy, too dated. Still, the image of Camilla wearing it, tall, confident, unflinching, spoke louder than any criticism. And one thing was undeniable: the tiara fit her perfectly. Despite its size and weight, it looked natural on her, almost as if it had been waiting for someone with exactly her presence, and, as some jokingly said, the right-sized head. The comment, meant to be humorous, held a grain of truth. This tiara isn't for everyone, not physically and not symbolically. Because the Delhi Durbar tiara doesn't complement an outfit, it dominates it. It's not just an accessory, it's a statement, the centerpiece of an entire appearance. To wear it, you need more than lineage. You need confidence, resilience, and the ability to carry the weight of history, quite literally and metaphorically. And Camilla did. Curiously, though, after that single event, the tiara disappeared once more. Camilla hasn't worn it again since. Nearly 20 years have passed, and the Delhi Durbar remains out of sight. Why? There are many theories. Some say it's simply too heavy to wear comfortably. Others believe its symbolism is too potent, too loaded with colonial undertones for the modern monarchy. And some suggest that it had already served its purpose, a single, powerful message delivered in one unforgettable appearance. The Queen supports Camilla. The crown is hers too. That one evening was enough to reignite public fascination. Historians, journalists, and royal watchers once again began dissecting the tiara's every curve, every gemstone, every modification. After decades of silence, the Delhi Durbar was speaking again, not with words, but with presence. It had survived obscurity, and with just one appearance, it reclaimed its place in the royal story. And Camilla, once the outsider, didn't just wear it, she claimed it as part of her own chapter, a chapter that, against all odds, would lead her to the throne. If someone looked at the Delhi Durbar tiara today without knowing its story, they might see it as nothing more than a massive, somewhat outdated piece of jewelry. But a closer look reveals something else entirely. This is no mere ornament. This is a relic of an empire, and at the same time, a symbol that never stopped speaking about power, ambition, dynastic silence, and the parts of royal history put are rarely discussed aloud. This tiara has undergone more transformations than many of the queens who owned it. In its original form, crowned with vivid emeralds, it carried a distinctly Eastern character. It was unapologetically grand, almost theatrical, and unmistakably imperial. The emeralds didn't just sparkle, they spoke. They made it clear this was the crown of a woman ruling over lands far from British shores. But once those emeralds were removed and replaced with diamonds, the tone shifted. The tiara lost its overt exoticism and gained a colder, more calculated elegance. Its appearance changed, but not its weight, neither physically nor symbolically. With every adjustment, the tiara adapted, but it never softened. After 1947, when India gained independence, wearing the Delhi Durbar tiara became complicated. For many, it now represented a bygone era, a time when Britain ruled over millions, often without consent. Perhaps that's why Queen Elizabeth II never wore it. It's not that she lacked the opportunity, it's that she may have sensed that some crowns say too much, even when no one speaks. Today, the tiara still exists, but it lives in silence. It's not part of the crown jewels, and it's not on display. It remains in the private royal collection, somewhere behind palace doors, carefully guarded, rarely mentioned. And yet, it's one of the most imperial tiaras ever made, and paradoxically, one of the most intimate. Physically, it remains what it has always been: massive, heavy, dominating. You can't hide it. You can't quietly blend in while wearing it. It commands attention. To wear the Delhi Durbar is not to complete a look, it's to make a declaration. And in today's monarchy, one that tries to be modern, accessible, even relatable, this tiara no longer fits. It's too loud, too honest, too real. While the institution becomes softer and quieter, this diadem still cuts with sharp lines and historical precision. And yet, it hasn't lost its power. All it took was one appearance to remind the world it's still here, and it still could return. One day, the right person might walk into the spotlight wearing it again. And when that happens, the tiara won't need an introduction. It will speak for itself. Because the Delhi Durbar was never just jewelry. It was, and still is, a warning, a legacy, a story not erased, but simply passed to a new generation. Will we ever see it again? Will someone dare to wear it, knowing everything it carries with it? Maybe, maybe not. But one thing is certain: real crowns don't vanish. They wait, quietly, until the time is right.